What's up, everybody? Jay Miller here, bringing another Productivity in Tech podcast. My guest today is Clay Russell. Clay is the founder and proprietor of the TechSide Network, which is home to many, many podcasts, some of those which Clay is also a host on. And I am not going to go down that list because I will miss one or two or five. But outside of that, Clay is also works with the Whataburger franchise of restaurants, and I'll let him get into a little bit more detail about that. But Clay, how are you doing today?
I'm doing absolutely excellent. Thank you for inviting me on your show here. Appreciate it.
I'm just glad that we finally were able to sit down and talk again. It's been so long. We were talking about we were using different technologies even the last time we chatted.
Yes, yeah, those kind of things change, right? Our needs change, and so does the tech and the software we use along with it.
Well, I gave a brief introduction, but please fill in the blanks and let the audience know a little bit more about yourself.
Well, first and foremost, I am a husband and a father, and I have a very supportive wife who allows me to do the things that I love on the side. My day job, of course, as you mentioned, is Whataburger. I'm a director of operations for the second largest franchise under the brand. We are continuing to grow. It's an exciting time for us. The Whataburger name and the brand itself is increasingly growing and getting more popular. We're getting out in different ways. You know, there's the, of course, the food, which is well known in the southern regions, but also our brand and marketing team is on fire right now. So if you get an opportunity to visit a Whataburger, please do. I believe in USA Today, we are being voted as the number one burger place. So you definitely want to check it out. So that's Whataburger. How do I get the job done? Well, I'm heavily invested in the Apple ecosystem and also the software that I use. And along with that, byproduct of having all this cool technology and software is being able to use it for things that I love, that being the TechSide Network. That is my passion. It started off with a single podcast that I accepted a Twitter invite from somebody. I did a job as a guest on the show, which turned into a regular thing. Before I knew it, I was in for about a year, and I kind of just took the podcast over at some point and wanted to do something more than just a single podcast. There's a lot of interest out there from a lot of people, and so we expanded, and it just grew and grew. And I think we've been at this for about maybe a little over 10 years now, and 13 podcasts in, we got more on the way, and it's just blown up into a fun hobby for me and a couple dozen friends.
So I had no idea that TechSide Network had been around for that long. I mean, I think the first TechSide podcast I had listened to was maybe 4 years ago, but that's impressive. I mean, what is the key to such longevity?
The key, number one, is you don't put pressure on the people. I make it clear up front, when you join the TechSide Network, it is a hobby. Everybody goes in knowing full well that we are not a profitable network. We take donations to pay for hosting fees and things of that nature, but we do this for fun. And at some point, we may pivot into something a little bit more experimental and look for ways to monetize. But for now, it is strictly a hobby. One of the other things that we do is we tend to go monthly in our shows. And what this allows us to do is to not feel the burden of being committed to 2 hours a week to a network. We have some shows it's basically an open invite to anybody on the network where you can come in and join if you're up for it, or take the night off if you don't. Now, my schedule is a little bit more committed. I do host about five of podcasts on the network, and that's a monthly schedule for those 5. So all in all, I'm probably only recording maybe 10 to 15 hours a month, and I'm probably editing, about twice that. But I keep it real simple. I would definitely say I'm not a pro on any scale when it comes to the work that I put into the podcast. We record as is. The structure is loose. We do have show notes, and we do spend some time going over some of the latest in the news, and we try to keep it to a format, but it's a loose format. And if we go off on some tangents, we go off on some tangents along the way. But the entire network's built around the idea of casual conversation. I am not an expert on anything in regard to technology. If I'm an expert in one thing, I would probably say maybe I'm a productivity expert, and that's because I've just tried about every possible method imaginable, and I would actually probably consider myself pretty productive considering the weight of my responsibilities. But the idea of the TechSide Network is casual conversation from passionate people. And when you join the TechSide Network, you know that we don't expect you to be an expert on any subject. No matter what podcast it is, it's almost from the take of a fan more so than an expert on the subject. So, and you'll get that. People can, tell us we're wrong, and we're completely fine with that, because what we offer on the show is our opinions, our thoughts, our methods for doing things. And sometimes we're right. Sometimes we fight over who's right and who's wrong, and we just have fun doing it. But the guys on the show, it's basically a bunch of guys just hanging out, having a good time, having a beer, and just talking about things that they love. So that's pretty much the gist of the TechSide Network. And we're opening that model to anybody just looking for a way to get into podcasting with very little effort. So we're always looking to add substantial content that is new and takes TechSide in a different direction. We've expanded past technology into fitness and health, and even a pro wrestling podcast here recently that's doing extremely well. But if you have something that you're passionate about, and you don't need to be an expert, but if you're just looking for a place to be heard, the TechSide Network's a great place for that. You and a host have an idea, you want to put it together. I help with the show art, with the music, the whole production. I host it. I give you a website. I give you an email for feedback. I create the whole thing, and all you got to do is show up and record. And you could do that on a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly.
So one of the things that you mentioned was all of the different things that you take care of for the individual hosts and their respective shows. I think that's something that a lot of people who, if you listen to any of the Relay FM shows, you listen to any of the NPR or BBC, any like Gimlet Media, any of those like major networks, there is usually a large group of people who are working on that content. And one of the things that I think that both of us as podcasters have done is to let the authenticity of I don't want to say small time podcasts, but the individual passionate hobbyist podcast ring through. Was that something that you mentioned that it's casual conversation? Was that something that that you said we're going to do this after the attempts to go mainstream or into like these larger podcast factories, or was it kind of that from the beginning?
It was that from the beginning. I've had my fair share of podcasts where you can hear everybody's opinion from everybody who thinks they're an expert, and a lot of those podcasts are well done. They're well put together, well produced, but I don't enjoy the conversation as much as I do when I'm talking with friends. Those are the kind of conversations I enjoy having. From the beginning, when I originally joined, it wasn't a network at the time, but the iOS Docked podcast, which is our longest running podcast, was actually iPhone Docked. It was started by a group of guys passionate also about technology, but they kicked that off and ran it for, I don't know, several months. And it kind of went their own way with it. There was a bunch of host changes, and from the get-go, all I remember is it being fun. It was just fun from the get-go. It was never meant to be a big production. It was just something that we enjoyed doing, and we had some listeners who just were dedicated and loyal fans. We still have some of those today who are just, waiting for that next episode. And I think what they enjoy and the feedback that we've had from our guests, and whether it be email or Twitter, is that they listen to us because it's different. Anybody can report the news. They can, anybody can quote numbers and data and throw names and brands and everything else out there. But if you just want to act like you're at a party and you're listening in on a conversation, I think that's the TechSide Network for you. And will there be a place? I'm going to give an example of a couple of friends of mine on the network, and that is, I'm going to call out Ken Cooper and Justin Klein. Those two gentlemen are, I believe, the closest thing we have to what I would consider a very well-produced podcast. If you get an opportunity to listen to the Apple Juice podcast, it's a weekly podcast that just recaps everything that has happened in Apple news. And I think that is a good example of something on the TechSide Network that you can look at and say, wow, that is a well-produced show. And I'm not trying to take anything away from the other shows. It's just different. They are actually, they have great chemistry. They are, the show is very well edited. Ken Cooper's doing a fantastic job, especially for somebody who's new to podcasting, and he's very passionate about it. And we provided that outlet for him. And depending on who you are and what your intent is, you can kind of do whatever kind of podcast you want to, whether it be, big time and you want to try to monetize it, go for it. I'm not going to stand in your way of that. That's awesome. But it's just, you take it wherever you want to go. And that's the TechSide Network. What do you want to do with your show? How can I help you? And that's pretty much it. But the TechSide Network was never meant to be a high production thing that we were going to turn into a business. It's always been fun. It's always been for friends, and it's always been a hobby.
No, very nice. And as someone who has listened to many of the shows, I'm partial to GTD Jedi, but I will say that the Apple Juice Cast is really good as well. Let's turn it, kind of like balancing it into more of the productivity side. You mentioned you do about 40 to 50 hours of podcast network related things on top of being a director of operations. Both of those roles are very demanding. How do you manage to, one, make sure that they don't interfere with each other, but then two, also, keep your sanity in the process?
Number one is everybody who joins the network, for one, understands that it is not my full-time job, that I have a schedule that I stick to. And some people, especially on the East Coast, don't like the late recordings, right? I record at 8:30 p.m. Central Time. The reason I do that is because I have family time when I get off of work, and I usually get home about 6:30 p.m. Central Time, and I've got a couple hours with my family, and I put my technology away. I put it on the charger. I spend those 2 hours with my family, and the family time usually consists of dinner, some playtime with my daughter, and then I kind of just enjoy story time. When my wife reads to my child, I like to be in the room. I like to listen to her read as well. It's kind of comforting, it's relaxing, and that's kind of how I wind down. And then I have an hour or two to myself at night. That's typically when I do the podcasting, or I set up notes for upcoming podcasts. And I might have an hour in the morning before I start my work day where I'll publish some podcast if I could get to it. But I pretty much reserve about an hour in the morning and a couple hours at night to do anything network related. My work days typically fall between around 8 a.m. and about 6 p.m. And that's 5 to 6 days a week, depending on the week that I'm having. When I open stores, when I open restaurants, and I just did that, let's see, I opened one in January, opened a new store in March. And when that's happening, I'll probably put in 90 to 100 hours a week. If I'm lucky, I can find a substitute host to replace me. If I have to reschedule, I'll reschedule. But my priorities will always be intact. It is my day-to-day job and my family that will always come before the network. That's for now and probably in the foreseeable future. But, like the Apple TV, for an example, it started out as a hobby and became a viable business. Will the TechSide Network get there? I don't know. But if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It will remain a fun side project for me. So, I think the important thing is time blocking, making sure that your priorities are in order and that you are giving the appropriate amount of time to those people that you answer to and that answer to you. And, and when I run 6 stores, I have 300 employees. They're demanding of my time just as when I'm home, families demanding of my time as well. And it's important that I'm there for both of those groups when I'm, at the job or at home. And then when it's podcasting time, I'm the same way. I try to be there for my network buddies.
So it sounds like the secret to your success has been a focus on being intentional about the things that you're doing. Like you said, not just paying attention to the people around you that rely on you in some way, but also paying attention to your own needs. And I think that's something that people in the tech space tend to forget about.
I don't know if I talked to you about this or if maybe I've shared it on a social network or maybe shared a story on a podcast, but there was a point about 3 or 4 months ago where I just had to hit the reset button. I had way too much going on. Had my stuff all over the place. I wasn't organized. The apps that I used, I had way too many doing the same thing. I didn't know which data was going where. It was just a mess, and it was cluttering my brain. Sleeping was not a priority to me anymore. I mean, I was sleeping 4 or 5 hours a day. It was catching up with me. I was just exhausted mentally. So I hit the reset button and really just refocused on my priorities again and started over. The restores on the devices, didn't put back anything on my devices that wasn't essential to what I needed to get done day to day. And that really helped a lot. And the next thing I did was I just started, like I said, batch processing everything. So email gets checked twice a day. I'll check it in the morning. I'll check it in the evening before I come home, and then I'm done. When I do check my email, it's either, I'll do quick replies. I'll postpone to a time when I know I'll have a bigger calendar block to handle the email. Or, I'll copy contents of an email to drafts and decide what to do with it when I empty out my draft inbox. But I typically don't do the same thing twice anymore. I'm very, very good about keeping things clean and not going back to the well too much in regard to those inboxes that can get you in trouble and become a distraction.
I know that a lot of my coaching clients come from Scrum shops or Agile shops where everything is very regimented, everything is on a deadline, and people are often reaching burnout just to hit a deadline. And it sounds like you avoid that by, one, just understanding that, like, hey, there's only so many hours in a day. I need a few of those to sleep, and I just possibly can't get everything done. But then you're also saying that I am going to be intentional about the things that I'm doing when I'm doing them, and everything else can wait until it's, whatever that thing is, when it's their turn. They can wait for that.
Oh, you nailed it. That's absolutely the way I'm working now. Can I plug an app on this show?
We normally don't talk about apps, but because it's you, I'll make an exception.
Okay. Well, because it kind of coincides with the way I've built my day up, and I'm the kind of guy who's tried all task managers under the sun, and there's so many great ones out there, but the one I've settled on here recently that just happens to work with my new way of doing things, like you said, working with intention and making sure that I'm focused on the task at hand. And so I'm using an app called Sorted 3. It's relatively new as far as how long it's been around. This version of it has been around a short while. It blends your tasks and it blends your calendar together. And this is the only app that I've found where you can really just streamline how you want to approach your day, what tasks you have, the duration of the task, and the priority level of these tasks. And you can really I know when I'm going to have energy. I know when I'm going to have some free time. And what I'll do at the beginning of every day is I will just, to the minute, I will try to detail my day. And as I go through the day, all I do is just check off the boxes. It's almost like automating my day. Like everything is just automated. I know exactly where I got to be, what I got to do, how long it's going to take to get there, the kind of energy I'm going to need to get the job done. And I mean, I have never in my life been more productive than I have been over the last couple of months. So this app has really helped me with that. They've got some really cool features. I'd recommend checking it out, but I'm not here to plug the app so much as it is that I wanted to share how I'm making that happen. And this Sorted 3 has really helped me with that. The other thing I think that is important to do is don't let things slip through the cracks. You have to have an inbox. You have to have some place, whether it be old school pen and paper, whether it be Post-it notes, whether it be your phone and a notepad. For me, I have an application where anytime I launch the application, it's an empty canvas, and everything that I need to remember goes in there. And I've often been referred to as the guy that's so organized. That's not necessarily the case. I'm just a guy with a system, and the system has happened to work for me. And I find that if somebody tells me something with the 500 things that I'm going to hear throughout the day that I need to remember, I just jot it down. And when I start my day in the morning, I go through that inbox of everything that I posted or written down or a thought or an idea, and I just file it away. I categorize it, I tag it, I put a date on it, and I put it away. And I don't think about it anymore until it's time to. And that has been extremely helpful to me. And it's not a secret. It's out there if you go looking for it, but capturing everything, processing the data, and then just getting it done.
Well, I will definitely allow the Sorted call, especially since we've had the team that built Sorted on the show before when they launched Sorted 2. And I am one of the contributors of workflows for the Sorted 3 application, but that's me as an automator, not as someone who is using it on a daily basis. I stand by my pen and paper, but the other application you mentioned, I believe it was Drafts, just having everything open as a blank slate and being able to have a process. That is something that just as a fellow Drafts user, I really appreciate the fact that you have a blank canvas, but yet you have so much power within the application itself. And I really do want to sit down with Greg and pick his brain as to, why allow so much power in such a little device. But the other thing that you really got me on was the idea of not doing things more than once. If anyone knows me, I'm an automation person. I'm actually an automator for hire. So if anybody ever needs something automated, whether you don't know the coding side of it or you don't know how widget A connects to widget B, I'm your guy. But that is something that I have grown to be wary of in that sometimes when we get so comfortable in our automation that we forget the steps. And a good example of this is I do a newsletter for another podcaster, and at one point I had the newsletter completely automated based on all the information that they do weekly. It pulls all that information down, it puts it in HTML, loads it into MailChimp, and then all I have to do is change a couple of things and hit enter. Well, recently there was a format change, and I haven't gotten around to modifying that workflow. So now I'm in the process of like having to go through it manually. And each time I've gone through it, it's like, well, wait a minute, was I supposed to do this? Or do I go over here? Do I need to add this thing over here? Like what am I doing wrong? Why am I not getting this right? And it has become this, I guess, tale of caution through experience of, it's great to have the system, make sure the system is documented, because one day your leg might fall off and you might need someone else to execute part of that system for you. And you're not going to be able to remember all the steps if you have a lot of it automated out. But the other side of that is too, like you said, applications change, but if you have a good system in place and a well-documented system in place, you can often take that system with you regardless of what email application, task management application, note-taking application that you're using.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned automation. It's kind of, I've gotten away from the Zapier, the IFTTT, the Hazel as a good Mac client. Let's see, another one is Alfred, Keyboard Maestro. I've gotten away from a lot of these, especially when I converted to the iPad Pro as my main machine. And what I've enjoyed is something that you made me think about was as I build the shortcuts to replace all these tools that I'm using elsewhere. And I've built some massive shortcuts. But what I like about building the shortcuts is I don't forget those steps. I can go back and look at all of the steps. I can swap the steps. I can make adjustments right there in the heart of the middle of the shortcut if I need to. So I keep familiar with how everything works, and it's right there in history, right? The other thing I like that I can do is you can duplicate these shortcuts before you go tinkering with them. So, especially if you've got one that's extremely complicated and long that you've built over a long amount of time and you've really customized it, you don't want to risk messing that up, right? You've put too many hours in. So always duplicate your shortcuts before you go tinkering with it and modifying it. But I think Apple's done a really good job by bringing shortcuts to the mobile devices that we use today, and the iPhone and the iPad. And I think that's going to take off. I wouldn't be surprised if shortcuts does come to the Mac eventually. But for now, I'm really excited about the future of automation just on the iPhone and iPad and what can be done today.
I am as well, and there are some really, really great tools that will allow you to do that, let alone the Shortcuts app itself is really wonderful. I actually recently went back to the Mac side of things only because of a new job that I picked up, and a lot of the editing requires specific software that isn't available on the iOS platform. But I definitely agree with you. One of the things that I like about using my iPad Pro as my primary device, my daily driver outside of my notebooks is the fact that it does limit you in some ways. If I look at I'm afraid to turn around and look at my desktop right now because I know that I've got a terminal open. I've got Safari open. I've probably got 2 or 3 windows of Safari open. I've got several different windows that have code in it, and who knows, there might be a game or something running in the background too. There's just so much going on. But when I'm on my iPad, like you said, having that intentional use case of it. Mm-hmm. You're only using one screen at a time. You're only maybe 2, maybe 3, but you're very limited. But in doing that allows you to focus and be intentional in the things that you are doing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that's going to wrap up the conversation here. But Clay, thank you for being such an awesome guest. Please let everyone know how they can connect with you.
I make it really simple. Clay Russell on Twitter, easy to find. I was lucky enough to get my name as a handle early on. But you can also find me on techside.net. You can see everything there. You can see all the podcasts we do. We have the photo galleries. Whatever you're into, I'm sure there's something there that you can enjoy. And if you don't enjoy it, let us know that too. We like the feedback, always looking to evolve. So check us out on techside.net or find me on Twitter at Clay Russell.
You've been listening to the Productivity in Tech podcast. If you would like to learn more about productivity in tech, the services that we provide, or our community and how to get involved, head over to productivityintech.com or follow us on Twitter at prod_in_tech. Thank you to Nadir Omawale for the use of his song A Hustler in Spite of Myself for the intro and outro music. I've been your host, Jay Miller. You can follow me on Twitter at kjaymiller.com. Thank you for listening. I hope we've been productive, and have a great day.